Samyaza, leader of the rebel angels, and his forbidden oath. Every great rebellion needs a leader, someone willing to take the first step, someone brave enough or foolish enough to gather followers and organize what should never be organized, someone who can turn individual desire into collective action. In the rebellion of the Watchers, that leader was Samyaza. He was not the most powerful of the fallen angels. That was Azazel. He was not the most beautiful. That honor belonged to Lucifer before his fall. He was not the wisest or the most talented, but Samyaza possessed something more dangerous than any of those traits. He was an organizer, a strategist, a leader who understood that rebellion succeeds not through individual strength, but through coordinated effort. And he knew one critical truth that would seal the fate of 200 angels. None of them wanted to fall alone. The Book of Enoch names him as the chief of the Watchers who descended to earth. His name in Hebrew means name of Samyaza, or possibly he has seen the name, suggesting he had knowledge of God's sacred name, a privilege granted only to the highest angels. He was trusted. He was respected, he held authority over his companions, and he used that authority to organize the greatest angelic conspiracy since Lucifer's rebellion. But Samyaza's story is different from Lucifer's. Lucifer fell from pride. He wanted to be God. Samyaza fell from desire. He wanted human women. His sin was not ambition, but lust. Not a quest for power, but a craving for forbidden pleasure. Yet in some ways, his fall was more calculated, more deliberate, more coldly rational than Lucifer's passionate revolt, because Samyaza knew he was committing evil. He knew the consequences. He knew God would punish him, and he decided to do it anyway. But he had one fear, one hesitation that almost stopped the entire rebellion before it began. What if he descended alone, took a human wife, and fathered children, and then the other Watchers, seeing his punishment, refused to follow? What if he alone faced God's wrath, while his fellow angels remained safely in heaven, perhaps even testifying against him? Samyaza could not bear the thought of falling alone, not from cowardice, but from a twisted sense of fairness. If he was going to be damned, he wanted company in his damnation. So he devised a plan, an oath, a binding covenant that would ensure that if one fell, all would fall. That if God punished him, he would have to punish all 200. That rebellion would be collective, coordinated, and impossible to stop once it began. On Mount Hermon, whose name means devoted to destruction, Samyaza gathered the Watchers and made them swear the most terrible oath ever spoken. They cursed themselves. They bound themselves. They committed themselves to fall together. And once that oath was taken, there was no turning back. Tonight, you will learn who Samyaza was before he became the architect of humanity's corruption. You will discover the exact words of the oath that damned 200 angels. You will witness the descent, the unions with human women, the birth of the Nephilim, and the catastrophic consequences that followed. And you will understand why, of all the fallen angels, Samyaza's crime is uniquely tragic, because he knew better, and he fell anyway. This is not the story of an angel who was deceived. This is the story of an angel who organized his own damnation and took 200 others with him. Let the forbidden oath be revealed. Before the fall, Samyaza held one of the highest positions in the angelic hierarchy. He was not just a Watcher, he was the leader of the Watchers, the chief officer of the angels assigned to observe and protect humanity. The Watchers were an elite group. Not all angels were given this responsibility. They had to be trusted, disciplined, and capable of operating in proximity to humans without becoming corrupted by mortal concerns. They were heaven's surveillance network, God's eyes watching over his newest and most beloved creation. Samyaza commanded them. When God gave instructions to the Watchers, he spoke through Samyaza, When angels needed assignments or guidance, they came to Samyaza. He was the bridge between the divine throne and the observation posts scattered across earth. His authority was not arbitrary. Ancient texts suggest he had proven himself over eons of faithful service. He had watched the creation of the world. He had seen humanity formed from dust. He had observed the expulsion from Eden, the murder of Abel, the growth of civilization. Through all of it, he had remained loyal, obedient, and dedicated to his mission. But observation is dangerous. The more closely you watch something, the more involved you become. The watchers were meant to observe from a distance, but distance is difficult to maintain when you see beings suffer, struggle, celebrate, and love. Empathy grows, connection develops, and with connection comes desire. Samyaza began to notice human women, not just observe them professionally, but notice them personally. Their beauty was different from angelic beauty, temporary, mortal, fragile. Angels were eternal and unchanging. Human women were fleeting, aging, finite. And somehow, that made them more precious. He watched them laugh. He watched them mourn. He watched them love their husbands and raise their children. And slowly, insidiously, a thought took root in his mind. I want that. I want to know what it feels like to love something temporary, to hold something fragile, to experience mortality not as an observer, but as a participant. This was not sudden passion. This was a slow corruption, a gradual erosion of boundaries. Day by day, year by year, decade by decade, Samyaza's professional detachment transformed into personal fascination, and fascination transformed into desire, and desire transformed into obsession. But he was not alone in this corruption. Other watchers were experiencing the same thing. Genesis 6:2 describes it simply. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful. It was not one angel, but many. Not an isolated incident, but a systemic problem. The entire surveillance network was compromised. Samyaza recognized what was happening. He saw the desire in his fellow watchers' eyes. He heard it in their conversations when they thought he was not listening. He felt it in himself and knew others felt it too. And instead of reporting this to heaven, instead of asking God to reassign them before corruption became action, Samyaza made a choice. He decided to organize it, to turn individual weakness into collective rebellion, to transform scattered desires into coordinated action. He was still a leader, still an organizer, still capable of gathering followers and directing their efforts toward a common goal. But now that goal was not obedience to God. It was satisfaction of forbidden desire. Samyaza began to speak privately with other watchers, careful conversations, testing their loyalty, measuring their desire, building consensus. He was not reckless, he was methodical. He needed to know who could be trusted to follow through, who would descend with him, who would not betray him to heaven, and slowly, carefully, he built his conspiracy. 200 angels, all trusted officers, all experienced watchers, all corrupted by the same desire, all willing to fall. If they did not have to fall alone, that was the key. Samyaza's genius, or his greatest evil, was understanding that none of them wanted to fall alone. So he offered them something irresistible: the safety of numbers, the comfort of shared guilt, the promise that if they fell together, they would face judgment together. And to seal that promise, he devised the oath. Mount Hermon rises over 9,000 feet above sea level, straddling the border of ancient Israel, Syria, and Lebanon. Its peak is covered in snow year-round, making it visible from vast distances. In ancient times, it was considered a sacred mountain, a place where earth touched heaven, where the divine realm seemed closer to the mortal world. It was here that Samyaza gathered the 200 watchers. The Book of Enoch records the event with disturbing precision, and Samyaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Read that carefully. Samyaza's fear was not that God would punish them. His fear was that he would be punished alone, that the others would abandon him after he descended, leaving him to face divine wrath by himself while they remained safely in heaven. This reveals something profound about the nature of his sin. He knew it was wrong. He knew punishment was coming. He knew God would not tolerate what they were planning. But his solution was not to repent. It was to ensure he had company in his damnation. The other watchers understood his fear, because they shared it. None of them wanted to descend alone. None of them wanted to be the first, the only one, the example. They wanted safety in numbers. They wanted shared guilt. They wanted the assurance that if they fell, they would fall together. So they agreed to take an oath. Not an oath of loyalty to each other, not an oath to accomplish some noble goal, but an oath to curse themselves, an oath to bind themselves into damnation together. Then they all swore together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. Mutual imprecations. That phrase is critical. An imprecation is a curse, a calling down of evil upon oneself. They were not swearing by God to be faithful. They were cursing themselves if they failed to follow through. They were binding their fates together through dark magic, through spiritual compulsion, through collective damnation. The oath had a specific formula. Each angel had to swear that he would descend to earth, take a human wife and father children. If any of them refused after taking the oath, the curse would fall upon him. But the curse they called down was not immediate punishment, it was isolation. The one who refused would be alone in his guilt, rejected by both heaven and his fellow rebels. This was psychological genius. Samyaza had created a mechanism that made it harder to repent than to sin. Once you took the oath, backing out meant betraying your companions and facing their curses in addition to God's judgment. The path of least resistance was forward into sin, not backward into repentance. Enoch names the leaders who took the oath: Samyaza himself, Azazel, Armaros, Barakiel, Kokabiel, Ezekiel, Arakiel, Shamziel, Sariel, Turiel, Yomiel, and Araziel. Each one a chief, a leader, an angel of high rank and responsibility, and beneath them 188 other watchers, all gathered on the peak of Mount Hermon, all speaking the words of the oath that would seal their fate. The mountain itself seemed to respond. Ancient legends claim that the moment the oath was completed, thunder rolled across the sky, though there were no clouds. The ground trembled. Animals fled. The very stones of Hermon seemed to recoil from what had been spoken. Mount Hermon would forever after be associated with this moment. Its name, devoted to destruction or cursed mountain, commemorates the oath. Jewish tradition holds that the mountain is spiritually scarred, a place where the barrier between the earthly and demonic realms is thin because of what the Watchers did there. But the oath was only the beginning. Now they had to fulfill it. Now they had to descend. And Samyaza, the architect of this conspiracy, would lead them down. The oath taken, there was no turning back. The 200 watchers descended from heaven in a coordinated exodus that must have been visible across the ancient world. 200 beings of light, leaving their posts, abandoning their assignments, defying their orders, and descending to earth. This was not like Lucifer's fall, violent, catastrophic, a war that split heaven. This was calm, deliberate, organized. They descended as an army on a mission, led by Samyaza, each one knowing exactly what they were going to do. They took physical form. Angels are spirits, but they can manifest bodies when necessary. The Watchers created bodies that were tall, radiant, overwhelmingly beautiful. They appeared as gods to the humans who saw them, powerful, glowing, impossible to resist. And then came the taking. Genesis 6:2 describes it simply. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. But that phrase, any of them they chose, is significant. The women had little choice in the matter. How does a mortal woman refuse an angelic being? How does she say no to a creature that seems divine? Ancient texts debate whether the unions were consensual or coercive. Some traditions suggest the women were willing, seduced by the beauty and power of the angels. Others suggest force, that the Watchers took what they wanted without regard for human agency. The Book of Jubilees provides more detail. And they took wives unto themselves, and everyone chose for himself one, and they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. The word defile suggests violation, corruption, something fundamentally wrong with what was happening. Samyaza himself took multiple wives. As the leader, he claimed this privilege. Ancient traditions name some of them, Nama, Ishtar, others whose names are lost to history. He fathered children with each one, hybrid offspring who would grow into the Nephilim giants. But Samyaza did not just take wives and disappear into domesticity. He continued to lead. He organized the other Watchers, assigning them territories, coordinating their activities, ensuring that the conspiracy remained cohesive, and he began to teach. While Azazel taught weapons and warfare, while other Watchers taught magic and astrology, Samyaza taught something more fundamental and perhaps more corrupting. He taught enchantments and root-cutting. Enchantments are spiritual manipulations, using words, rituals, and spiritual forces to control reality. Root-cutting refers to herbalism and potions, using plants to create medicines, poisons, aphrodisiacs, and hallucinogens. Both represent power over natural processes, the ability to manipulate creation in ways it was not meant to be manipulated. Samyaza was teaching humanity to hack reality, to bypass God's natural order and impose their own will on creation. This was not mere knowledge. This was the beginning of sorcery, of witchcraft, of the dark arts that would plague humanity for millennia. His students spread this knowledge. Villages that learned Samyaza's enchantments could curse their enemies. Tribes that mastered his potions could poison rivals, seduce unwilling partners, induce visions, and speak with spirits. The spiritual realm, which God had carefully separated from the physical realm, was now accessible through techniques taught by a fallen angel. The corruption spread rapidly. What began with 200 angels taking human wives became a civilization-wide catastrophe. The Nephilim grew to adulthood and began to rule. Hybrid bloodlines spread through human populations. Forbidden knowledge flowed from angels to humans to demons. The world that God had created good was becoming systematically corrupted. And Samyaza, the organizer, the leader, the one who had made them all swear the oath, watched his rebellion succeed beyond his wildest expectations. He had what he wanted: human wives, powerful children, worship from mortals who saw him as a god. But heaven was watching too, and judgment was being prepared. Samyaza's wives gave birth to giants, the Nephilim, beings who should never have existed. Hybrids of angel and human that violated the very structure of creation. The Book of Enoch describes them with horror. And they became pregnant, and they bore great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells. 3,000 ells would be approximately 4,500 feet. Obviously symbolic hyperbole, but the point is clear. These beings were massive, far larger than any human. More realistic traditions place them at 15 to 20 feet tall. Still enormous, still powerful, still capable of dominating ordinary humans through sheer physical superiority. But Samyaza's sons were not just large. They inherited traits from both parents, from their human mothers: mortality, appetites, emotions. From their angelic father, supernatural strength, extended lifespans, spiritual awareness. The combination created beings who were physically powerful but spiritually unstable. They were cursed from birth. Neither fully angel nor fully human, they belonged to neither realm. Heaven would not accept them. Earth could not contain them. They were abominations in the truest sense, beings whose very existence violated divine order. Ancient traditions name some of Samyaza's most notorious offspring, Ohya and Hahya, twin giants who became legendary for their strength and cruelty. Mahawai, who could run faster than any creature on earth. Gilgamesh, the mighty king of Uruk, whose exploits were recorded in ancient Mesopotamian texts. Some scholars believe he was Nephilim, a hybrid with supernatural abilities who sought immortality because he knew his existence was cursed. These were not gentle giants. They were violent, ravenous, insatiable. The Book of Enoch describes their appetite in disturbing terms. They consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. Cannibalism. The Nephilim, when other food ran out, began eating humans. Samyaza's children, born from his forbidden desire, became monsters who preyed on the very race their mother came from. But Samyaza did not stop them. He could not, or perhaps, twisted by his own corruption, he did not want to. He had organized rebellion. He had led 200 angels into sin. He had fathered hybrid children. What were a few more sins added to his growing list? His sons established kingdoms, using their supernatural strength and their father's teachings in enchantment. They conquered territories and ruled as god-kings. Humans worshipped them out of fear and necessity. Temples were built, sacrifices were offered. The Nephilim became the basis for ancient mythologies, the Titans of Greece, the Jotnar of Norse legend, the Anunnaki of Sumeria. And Samyaza watched his bloodline spread across the earth. He had wanted human wives. He got them. He had wanted children. He got them. He had wanted power and influence in the mortal realm. He had it. But something was wrong. The world was not becoming better under angelic guidance. It was becoming worse. Violence was endemic. Corruption was universal. The genetic pollution from angel-human unions was spreading through the human population. Samyaza had unleashed something he could not control. The Book of Jubilees records a chilling detail. Samyaza began to realize his mistake, not enough to repent, but enough to fear. He saw his sons devouring humans. He watched the violence escalate. He witnessed the corruption spreading beyond what even he had intended. And he knew that heaven would respond. God would not allow this to continue. Judgment was coming. The oath he had made his fellow watchers take would not protect him from divine wrath. But it was too late. The oath was binding. The children were born. The corruption was complete, and Samyaza, the organizer of humanity's greatest catastrophe, could only wait for the consequences he knew were coming. His fear was about to be realized, but not in the way he expected. When heaven's judgment began, when the archangels descended to bind the watchers and destroy the Nephilim, Samyaza did something unexpected, something that reveals both his intelligence and his delusion. He begged for mercy. The Book of Enoch contains one of the most pathetic passages in all apocryphal literature. After the watchers were captured, after they were dragged from their earthly kingdoms and imprisoned, Samyaza made a desperate appeal. He asked Enoch, the human prophet who walked with God, to intercede for them, to write a petition on their behalf, to present their case before the throne of heaven and ask for forgiveness. Think about that. Samyaza, the organizer of angelic rebellion, asked a human to plead with God for angelic forgiveness. The irony is crushing. He had fallen because he desired humans. Now he needed a human to save him. Enoch, righteous and obedient, agreed. Not because he sympathized with the watchers, but because God instructed him to show them the futility of their hope. Enoch wrote the petition, detailing their remorse, their regret, their claim that they had not understood the consequences of their actions. It was a lie, of course. Samyaza had known. He had feared punishment enough to make them all swear an oath, but desperation makes liars of everyone, even angels. Enoch ascended to heaven in a vision, carrying the petition. He stood before God's throne, surrounded by angels of fire, beneath the crystalline floor that reflected divine glory, and he presented the watcher's plea for mercy. God's response was swift and absolute. "Go, say to the watchers of heaven, who have sent you to intercede for them, you should intercede for men, not men for you. Why have you left the high, holy, and eternal heaven, and lain with women, and defiled yourselves with the daughters of men, and taken wives unto yourselves, and done like the children of earth, and begotten giants as sons?" The accusation cut to the heart of their crime. They were supposed to intercede for humans, not the other way around. They were assigned to protect, not to corrupt. They had abandoned their position, their purpose, their sacred duty. And then came the verdict. You have been in heaven, but all the mysteries had not yet been revealed to you, and you knew worthless ones, and in the hardness of your hearts you have made these known to women, and through these mysteries women and men work much evil on earth. Say to them, therefore, you have no peace. No peace. Not, you will be punished. Not, you will suffer. Just the simple, devastating declaration, you have no peace. The petition was rejected. There would be no forgiveness, no second chance, no mercy for angels who knew better and sinned anyway. Enoch returned to earth and delivered the message to Samyaza and the other watchers. The text describes their reaction, and they were all afraid, and fear and trembling seized them. Samyaza, who had organized the oath to prevent exactly this outcome, now faced it anyway. The oath had not protected them. The numbers had not saved them. The conspiracy had not worked. They were going to be punished, all of them, together, just as they had fallen together. But Samyaza's punishment would be unique. While all the watchers were imprisoned, his crime carried special weight. He was the leader, the organizer, the one who had devised the oath, the one who had made it possible for 200 angels to fall in coordination. His guilt was not just personal, it was organizational. He had corrupted not just himself, but an entire class of angels. He had turned individual weakness into collective rebellion, and for that, his punishment would reflect his unique role. He would not just be imprisoned, he would be bound in a specific way, in a specific place, as a specific example of what happens when leadership is corrupted and authority is abused. The archangel Michael received the command to bind Samyaza. It is fitting that Michael, the great defender of divine order, would be assigned to imprison the one who had organized chaos. The book of Enoch records God's specific instructions. Go, bind Samyaza and his associates who have united themselves with women so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation, till the judgment that is for ever and ever is consummated. 70 generations. At 25 years per generation, that is approximately 1,150 years. A period so long that the world would transform entirely while they remained imprisoned. But this was not their final punishment. It was their holding cell until the day of eternal judgment. Michael descended with chains of spiritual darkness, bonds that could hold angelic beings against their will. He found Samyaza surrounded by the remnants of his rebellion, his fellow watchers, his hybrid sons, the humans who had worshipped him as a god, and he bound him. The text does not describe Samyaza resisting. Perhaps he knew resistance was futile. Perhaps the weight of his guilt had finally crushed his will. Or perhaps, having seen his sons slaughter each other in the wars Gabriel had orchestrated, having witnessed the destruction of everything he had built, Samyaza simply had no fight left in him. Michael dragged him to the valleys of the earth, deep places, hidden caverns, pits in the foundations of the world where no light reaches. There, Samyaza was chained. Not just physically bound, but spiritually imprisoned, locked in place by divine authority. But Samyaza's punishment had a unique feature. While other watchers were simply imprisoned, Samyaza was forced to watch. God arranged his binding so that he could see, could hear, could remain aware of the world above, even though he could not reach it. He watched his sons die. The Nephilim, giants born from his forbidden unions, were destroyed in the great flood. He heard their screams as the waters rose. He witnessed them trying to survive, climbing mountains, clawing at the ark's doors, drowning in terror and agony. His human wives, the women he had desired so strongly that he organized angelic rebellion to possess them, died as well, swept away in the deluge, gone. The objects of his fatal desire, drowned because of what his desire had unleashed. And Samyaza could do nothing. He was bound, chained, imprisoned. He could only watch, listen, and suffer the knowledge that his leadership, his organization, his oath, had led to this. But the psychological torment went deeper. Samyaza had made his fellow watchers swear an oath so they would not fall alone. He had promised them safety in numbers, protection through collective guilt. He had assured them that falling together would be better than falling alone. Now they were all imprisoned together, and instead of comfort in shared suffering, there was only accusation. The other watchers blamed him. He was the leader. He had organized this. He had made them swear the oath. Their damnation was his fault. Jewish mystical traditions suggest that the Watcher's prison is filled with the sounds of mutual recrimination, angels blaming each other, Samyaza blaming himself, all of them conscious, aware, unable to escape or die, locked together in suffering that will last until the end of time. Samyaza had feared falling alone. Now he discovered something worse, falling with 200 others who hate you for leading them into damnation. The oath that was meant to protect him had become his greatest torment. He was not alone, but he was surrounded by those who blamed him for their shared fate. Thousands of years have passed since Samyaza was bound. The world he corrupted was washed clean by the flood. The Nephilim he fathered were destroyed. The women he desired are long dead. The knowledge he taught has been filtered through so many generations that its source is forgotten. But Samyaza remains, conscious, aware, imprisoned in the valleys of the earth, counting the generations, waiting for the final judgment. What does an angel think about when bound in darkness for millennia? What thoughts haunt a being who once walked in heaven's light, but chose to descend for forbidden pleasure? The Book of Enoch suggests that the bound watchers experience a unique form of torment, spiritual rather than physical. They are not being burned or tortured in the conventional sense. Their suffering is psychological, emotional, existential. They remember heaven, the perfect light, the eternal worship, the presence of God. They remember what it felt like to serve with joy, to exist in harmony with divine will, to be part of the celestial order. And they know they will never experience it again. For Samyaza, the torment is compounded by his role as leader. He cannot claim ignorance. He cannot say he was deceived or coerced. He organized the rebellion. He devised the oath. He made it possible for 200 angels to fall in coordination. Every one of those angels, imprisoned alongside him, suffering the same fate, is his responsibility. Their damnation is on his conscience. Their eternal regret is partially his fault. Jewish tradition holds that Samyaza's prison is constructed so that he can hear the prayers of humans above. Every prayer to God is a reminder of what he lost. Every act of worship is evidence of the relationship he abandoned. Every righteous human is proof that obedience was possible, that he could have resisted, that his fall was a choice, not a necessity. And he hears the consequences of his actions continuing. Wars fought with weapons that trace back to Azazel's teachings. Magic practiced based on principles he revealed. Corruption spreading through bloodlines that still carry traces of Nephilim genetics. His rebellion did not just damn himself and 200 angels. It corrupted all of human history. Every evil that followed, every murder, every war, every dark magic ritual has roots in what the Watchers taught. But perhaps the deepest torment is this. Samyaza got what he wanted. He desired human women. He took them. He fathered children. He experienced mortality, love, family, all the things he craved when he was in heaven. And it was not worth it. The pleasure was temporary. The consequences are eternal. He traded infinite glory for finite pleasure, and now he has neither, only the memory of what he lost and the knowledge of what he gained being worthless. The oath he made the others swear haunts him. Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan. Those words echo in his prison. He bound himself and 200 others to damnation through an oath that cannot be broken. And one day the prison will open, not for release, but for transfer. The 70 generations will end. The day of judgment will come. And Samyaza, along with all the Watchers, will be brought before God's throne for final sentencing. Revelation speaks of the lake of fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. Jewish eschatology describes Gehenna, the place of eternal punishment, where the wicked are consumed but never destroyed. Wherever the final destination, Samyaza knows it is coming. His current imprisonment is just the waiting room. The real punishment has not even begun. And he has had thousands of years to contemplate it, thousands of years to regret, thousands of years to wish he could undo the oath, reverse the descent, remain in heaven where he belonged. But wishes change nothing. Oaths cannot be unsworn, and the leader of the rebel angels can only wait for the judgment he knows he deserves. And so we close the forbidden file on Samyaza, the organizer of angelic rebellion, the architect of the oath that damned 200 angels, the leader who fell not from pride but from lust and dragged his entire command structure with him. His story is perhaps the most tragic of all the fallen angels because it was so avoidable. Lucifer fell in the heat of pride in a moment of cosmic arrogance, but Samyaza fell after careful planning. After weighing the consequences, after understanding exactly what he was risking. He knew it was wrong. His fear of falling alone proves that. He knew punishment was coming. The oath he demanded proves that. He understood he was violating divine law, and he did it anyway. Why? Because he wanted human women, because he desired something he was forbidden to have, because he believed that temporary pleasure was worth eternal damnation, and he was wrong. The women died, the children were destroyed, the pleasure ended, but the consequences continue forever. His story raises uncomfortable questions for anyone who reads it. How many of us organize our own fall? How many of us convince others to join us in sin so we do not have to sin alone? How many of us take oaths, make commitments, bind ourselves to courses of action we know are wrong? Samyaza's genius was organization. He took individual weakness and turned it into collective rebellion. He made falling easier by ensuring no one had to fall alone. He created a system where backing out was harder than sinning, and 200 angels followed him into damnation because of it. The oath on Mount Hermon was not just a historical event. It is a pattern that repeats throughout human history. Every conspiracy, every organized evil, every group that binds itself together in sin, all of them echo Samyaza's oath. When people swear to keep each other's secrets, when groups vow to protect each other even when they are doing wrong, when organizations bind themselves together in corrupt practices, when friends promise not to tell, not to judge, not to interfere. All of these are echoes of the oath on Mount Hermon. Samyaza proved that falling together is not better than falling alone. It is just more damning. Because now you are not just responsible for your own sin, you are responsible for everyone you led into it. The Book of Enoch is banned from most Bibles. The story of Samyaza and the Watchers is considered too disturbing, too detailed, too uncomfortable. But perhaps it is banned because it reveals too much about human nature. We want company in our sin. We want to feel like we are not the only ones. We want the safety of numbers, the comfort of shared guilt, the assurance that if we are punished, others will be punished too. But shared damnation is still damnation, and the leader who organizes evil bears a special guilt that multiplies his suffering. Samyaza is bound in the valleys of the earth, surrounded by 200 angels who blame him for their fate, waiting for a judgment that will transfer him from a prison of stone to a lake of fire. He fell together with others, and he will burn together with them, forever. The truth was never meant to be hidden forever. Now you know the name of the angel who organized the greatest conspiracy in heaven, the leader who traded eternity for a moment, the organizer who bound himself and 200 others to damnation through an oath that cannot be broken. Samyaza, leader of the rebel angels, architect of the forbidden oath, prisoner forever.